What is it? Is it being recorded? What is it being recorded?
Yes.
So anybody who misses it can watch it later. No?
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm so pleased and happy to introduce to you today our friend and colleague, Professor Charles Buttrrworth from Maryland, the University of Maryland. What can I say? I mean, when introducing such a scholar, Charles Buttrrworth accumulated a very, very long and interesting experience in teaching and editing and translating. He taught in many places in the world, in France, in the Middle East, the United States. Now he is an emeritus professor. He edited so many texts by Ibn Rushd, especially, I mean, the texts on logic. He edited, I mean, as examples, he edited the middle commentary on Aristotle's Dialectic, middle commentary on Aristotle's prior analytics. He edited also a middle commentary on Aristotle's Poetics. These are, I mean, only some examples of his very, very interesting editions. I mean, which I can say about them that they are incontournables. You cannot, I mean, tu peux pas les dépasser. What can I add is that he also, which is of high interest, he also translated many texts by Al-Fârâbî and Ibn Rushd. He translated some middle commentaries by Ibn Rushd and some of his short commentaries or epitomes, as he translated many texts by, I mean, especially political writings by Al-Fârâbî. And now we are waiting, I mean, for the appearance of his, I mean, great translation of Al-Fârâbî's book of letters, Kitab al-Huruf li Al-Fârâbî. I'm so happy because I'm so happy to introduce today, I mean, Charles Buttrrworth, because I'm, as a scholar, I learned a lot from Charles Buttrrworth, and I'm still learning from his writings. Today, he will deal with a topic of, let's say, Al-Fârâbî on dialectic, its promise and limits. A topic which is not new, I mean, to Charles Buttrrworth. Let's say 40 years ago, he published a very interesting text on Ibn Rushd's Dialectic. I mean, which is right now, I mean, of the classics in this topic. سيداتي سادتي، أصدقاؤنا الأعزاء، صديقاتنا، يسعدني أن أقدم باسم مؤسسة البحث في الفلسفة والعلوم في السياقات الإسلامية شخصية غير عادية في تاريخ الفلسفة، يعني في السياقات الإسلامية. هو كما نسميه شيخ الدراسات الرشدية في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. شخصية ركمت بحوثا أو تجربة كبيرة جدا في التحقيق وفي الترجمة، كما ركمت تجربة في التدريس. تخرج على يديه الكثير من الدارسين يعني حول العالم، وتأثر به الكثير من الدارسين حول العالم. صاحب نشأة الدرس الأكاديمي الفلسفي في الفلسفة الإسلامية في المغرب، يعني وله تفاعل كبير مع ما كان يحصل في المغرب وما يزال لحسن الحظ. سعيد جدا شخصيا لأني تعلمت كثيرا من كتابات هذا الرجل وما زلت أتعلم. سعيد جدا لأنه استجاب لدعوتنا، لدعوة المؤسسة، لإلقاء هذه المحاضرة، والتي أتصور أنها ستكون في غاية الأهمية. تشارلز باترورث يعني نشر أعمالا كثيرة، منها تحقيقات لتلخيص ابن رشد المنطقية. يمكن أن أذكر تلخيص كتاب الجدل، تلخيص كتاب الشعر، من بين أمثلة أخرى، كما ترجم فصل المقال إلى الإنجليزية وأعاد تنقيح النشرة التي كان قد قام بها محسن مهدي. أيضا ترجم إلى الإنجليزية كتابات الفارابي، كما ترجم إلى الإنجليزية، وننتظر صدور هذا الكتاب. ترجم كتاب الحروف للفارابي، والذين يشتغلون بفلسفة الفارابي يدركون أهمية هذا العمل. تشارلز باترورث درس في أنحاء العالم، درس في فرنسا، كما درس في مصر في بير زيت، كما درس في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. اليوم هو أستاذ شرفي في جامعة ميريلاند، حيث قضى عشرات السنين هناك كمدرس. يسعدني اليوم أن أقدمه إليكم ليحاضر في موضوع ليس جديدا بالنسبة لتشارلز باترورث. سبق أن قدم مقالة جيدة حول مفهوم الجدل عند ابن رشد. اليوم يحدثنا عن مفهوم الجدل عند الفارابي. So, Charles Buttrrworth, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much for the excellent introduction, very flattering and pleasant introduction. It's especially an honor to present before you because I see you, Fuad, and right next to you, Thérèse and Terry, all three of whom helped me, all three of us got to know you through the different organizations, especially the CSPI organization. And then also we were able to become better acquainted with Muqtad through that organization. So it's a very interesting, a very intimate, small family that we have here. What I want to talk about today, Al-Fârâbî on the Promise and Limits of Dialectic, begins as an academic inquiry and has its importance as an academic inquiry. For better or for worse, it also has its importance in a practical sphere, especially a political sphere. There is no reason to dwell upon that. However, it would be worthwhile, and I will try to do that as I bring this to a conclusion, on the reason for the practical aspects of dialectic having both promise and limits being heeded by all of us. Let me begin by trying to introduce the subject. When one opens a treatise by Al-Fârâbî, virtually any treatise, one is offered a plethora of delights, ranging from a succinct account of what constitutes happiness now and forever, sharp definition of well-ordered religion, sketch of order in the universe and heavenly bodies, on to a crisp summary of how awareness of all the sciences can be quickly attained. His treatises also raise fundamental questions, such as what guides humans in their practical decisions? Judgment with all its shortcomings, or is it judgment with all its shortcomings, or is it certain knowledge? Still, even as his writings begin with titillating promises of great insight into such practical problems, all too often they close having presented us only conundrums, while clearly identifying the tension between a grasp of the way things are and false pretense of having it. They do not resolve it, much less show the way to the desired alternative. Were you to ask for an example, I would immediately refer you to the selected aphorisms, especially aphorism 94, the only aphorism in that treatise that has a title. The title being On the Uses of the Theoretical Part in Philosophy, and that it is necessary for the practical part in different ways. That's the example I would give you. When you can tell me what it is that we should learn from that aphorism, I will be very happy, because I have not yet found that myself. Al-Fârâbî promises a world of delight to those who can understand the teachings of Plato and Aristotle, even more perhaps what both mean by their riddles and indirect speech. We must learn to decipher both. Differently stated, how are we to understand the claims of Plato's Socrates, especially the claim of ignorance and the insistent inquisitiveness of Aristotle? Is this their way to dissimulate what they know, or are they serious about their ultimate ignorance? If the answer to these questions is an affirmative, how can Al-Fârâbî's claim that science has been completed by Aristotle be understood? In the Book of Letters, Part 2, Section 143, Al-Fârâbî says the following. Then, this is after having explained how the syllogistic arts developed and brought us through the use of dialectic by Plato to the formal presentation of logic by Aristotle. And then having done that, he says, then all of this will be debated until the affair is settled on as it was settled on in the days of Aristotle. Scientific inquiry will then culminate in distinguishing all of the methods, and both universal theoretical and practical philosophy will be perfected, with no room left in them for investigation. Hence, philosophy will become an art that is only learned and taught. It will be taught through one sort of instruction for the elect and another sort of instruction that is common for all. The instruction for the elect will be by demonstrative methods alone, while the common instruction, which is the ordinary instruction, will be by dialectical, rhetorical, or poetical methods. However, rhetorical and poetical methods or more properly used in teaching the multitude opinions about theoretical and practical things that have been settled on and validated by demonstration. That's an amazing claim. And I continue by saying that the pursuit of answers to the questions so raised, that pursuit is epistemological. And as such, to refer for a moment to one of our contemporary journalists, a journalist who has claims to having studied political philosophy, I would use his phrase: epistemology is, quote, concerned with the nature and limits of knowledge. The person I'm referring to is George Will, who has a certain reputation for trying to put his finger on difficult problems. So what does Al-Fârâbî say about certain knowledge and its acquisition in the writings designed to provide us guidance? His logical works. In some, not much. His writings on logic fall into three groups: introductory summaries, middle or short commentaries, and long commentaries. Given the succinct character of what he has to say in the introductory treatises and the silence of his long commentary about long commentary on De Interpretatione, the only long commentary now extant. Given all this, it's necessary to focus on the middle commentaries. Alas, they say little about the questions relevant to my inquiry. The Kitab al-Qiyas doesn't speak about what knowledge is or how it's to be acquired, nor does it address the terms Tasdiq, which is either avowal or assent in English, and tasawwur, concept. It says nothing about these terms that play such an important role in the acquisition of knowledge. I jump immediately to the Kitab al-Qiyas, to the commentary, so to speak, on the prior analytics, because in the two works that precede that, the categories for De Interpretatione, the issue just doesn't come up. Now, after the Kitab al-Qiyas, Al-Fârâbî's short commentaries move on to, in the short commentaries, there's another treatise, Kitab al-Qiyas al-Saghir, على طريق المتكلمين, كتاب التحليل, and finally كتاب الأمكنة المغلطة. So the small book of the syllogism, according to the method of the mutakallimun, or the dialectical theologians, the book of analysis, and the book of deceptive contexts, which is a way of referring to, but is not identical to, sophistical reputations. I think that the sophistical reputations is in the background, but this is not the topic of this treatise, of the treatise in question. The discussion of tasdiq and tasawwur in this last writing, the Kitab al-Amkina al-Mughlata, contributes nothing to an understanding of their epistemic role. They are discussed there, and it's only there that they occur, but we learn nothing from them. Now, that said, the summary itself is exceptionally clear. It merits close attention due to the emphasis it accords awareness of the syllogism and how it works, how the syllogism works, plus the faculties attained without knowledge of the syllogism. This issue is quite interesting, and I would like to just step aside for a moment to speak about it. Al-Fârâbî speaks here. He also speaks a little bit about it in the Kitab al-Qiyas al-Saghir, the book, the small book of the syllogism, according to the method of the Mutakallimun, about the faculties as follows. They are faculties that allow you to have apprehension of maqbulat, which I would translate as generally accepted things, mashhurat, generally received things, al-mahsus or al-mahsusat, things that are perceived by the senses, and I'm now forgetting the term, ma'kulat, the things that are apprehended by the intellect. So you have these four things or faculties for gaining cognition, awareness of these things that do not come about by way of syllogism. What's important about them is what they teach us and how those things allow us to get at the one issue that is fundamental to any learning, to any acquisition of knowledge: first principles. So what I want to do is to, and what he says that what we have to do is to reason about them. We have to try to figure out how, by reasoning, we can better apprehend them. We need to organize our thinking so that by drawing a comparison between something that's expressed in one statement as well as in another, we can conclude something new about it. For this kind of discipline, then, we have to turn to Al-Fârâbî's short commentaries on demonstration, the conditions of certainty, and dialectic. And what I mean by that is Kitab al-Burhan, Kitab Shara'it al-Yaqeen, and Kitab al-Jadal. So that's what needs to be done. I want to step back now and just remind you of some other things about Al-Fârâbî and his approach to issues of theory and of practice. In the Attainment of Happiness, that the first treatise of that remarkable trilogy, Attainment of Happiness, the Philosophy of Plato, and the Philosophy of Aristotle, Al-Fârâbî makes an amazing statement. Let me just read it because it is so important. The human things through which nations and citizens of cities attain earthly happiness in this life and supreme happiness in the life beyond are of four kinds: theoretical virtues, deliberative virtues, moral virtues, and practical arts. Now, what Al-Fârâbî then does in the attainment is to take us through a long series of steps showing how we can attain the theoretical virtues. Those steps resemble Aristotelian doctrine and Aristotelian procedure very much. when we come to an end of that investigation, Al-Fârâbî says the following. This then is theoretical perfection. As you see, it comprises knowledge of the four kinds of things by which the citizens of cities and nations attain supreme happiness. What still remains is that these four be realized and have actual existence in nations and cities, while conforming to the account of them given by the theoretical sciences. Well, what then happens is he takes us through those three other issues: deliberative virtue, moral virtue, and practical arts, showing that they are acquired, what they mean when they are acquired, but not how they are acquired. That's problematic because, I'll just step back. I was listening to a representative in the United States Congress identify himself on television the other night. He identified himself as a lawmaker. Okay. Yeah, that's accurate. We call these people legislators, but somehow making laws it elevates a person. And you think that the person needs to have a great deal of wisdom to do that. What we find when we have studied Al-Fârâbî's account of how happiness is attained, if we turn to almost the end of that treatise, to section 55, we find the following. We find that I have to find the passage exactly now. There are two ways of making a thing comprehensible. First, by causing its essence to be perceived by the intellect, and second, by causing it to be imagined through the similitude that imitates it. Assent, too, so that's concept. Assent, too, is brought about by one of two methods, either the method of certain demonstration or the method of persuasion. Now, when one acquires knowledge of the beings or receives instruction in them, if he perceives their ideas themselves with his intellect and his assent to them is by means of certain demonstration, then the science that comprises these cognitions is philosophy. But if they are known by imagining them through similitudes that imitate them, and assent to what is imagined of them is caused by persuasive methods, then the ancients call what comprise these cognitions religion. So that's the tension that we have. How do we know things? What is the status of our knowledge of them? And is our knowledge something that is solid? Is it philosophy or is it religion? What is it that the lawgiver and the philosopher know? Then when we continue with this discussion that Al-Fârâbî has put upon us, if we turn to the philosophy of Plato, to the end of that inquiry that Plato presents, we find the following. We find that Plato, or Plato's interlocutor, Socrates, wasn't as successful as one might be. And so Al-Fârâbî says, then after that, he's going through a number of the inquiries that Socrates or Plato took on. Then after that, he investigated what orders of rank the princes, the philosophers, and the virtuous ought to have in the eyes of the citizens of the city. By what means the citizens of the city ought to glorify them, and by what means the virtue ought to be exalted and the princes exalted. When that treatise does end, what we find out is that Plato understood that there was a tension between the inquisitiveness of Socrates, the badgering of Socrates, and the rhetorical appeal of one of Socrates' contemporaries, Thrasymachus, and what Al-Fârâbî's Plato understands is that it's necessary to combine the two. You can't have someone like Socrates always pushing himself upon people and showing them how ignorant they are, succeed. Nor can you allow in a polity for somebody who is a trickster like Thrasymachus to succeed. But Plato then seems to understand, at least according to Al-Fârâbî, that what's needed is a combination of the two. So that's what we learn from Al-Fârâbî's account of Plato. When we come to his account of Aristotle, he goes through everything having to do with Aristotle's inquiry. But at the very end, I'm not going to read you the whole passage because I'm sure you're familiar with it. In section 99 of the Philosophy of Aristotle, he explains that as important as the science of metaphysics comes to be in Aristotle's understanding, Aristotle does not have it. He has not seized upon metaphysics. And the only thing that is left is for each of us to investigate these matters on our own and for that to use philosophy. So we need to turn to philosophy for it. So what is it that we have then? Do we have this assertive understanding from the book of letters that everything has been settled and what Aristotle achieved is knowledge and now needs to be taught by popular methods? Or are we still torn between the path of Socrates, Plato-Socrates, and the path of Aristotle? That is the dilemma that I see. And then I would just simply to emphasize that problem, I'd say the following. In the enumeration of the sciences, chapter 5 on political science, the art of Kalam, of dialectical theology, and the art of jurisprudence, Al-Fârâbî seems to admit that the notion of philosophy, of political philosophy, held by the ancients has now been superseded. Religion and the opinions central to religion seem to take the place of character formation that was promulgated by the old political philosophy. Is that so? That's the problem. My understanding of Al-Fârâbî is that he addresses that challenge in the book of religion. And I would just ask you to remember the very end of the book of religion, section 27. It's a summary of political science that is a part of philosophy. Has it now become identical to virtuous religion? If so, what is the status of its teachings? Are they demonstrative or dialectical? Now, does that mean that the promise of the attainment has been achieved by the end of the book of religion? That is, has it now become possible for theory to guide practice? And then that also means that the aphorism that I started all of this with, aphorism 94, will have been proven somehow to be correct. Theory does guide practice. So let me just, without drawing this on too much further, in his treatise about the art of dialectic, which is ostensibly a commentary on Aristotle's topics, Al-Fârâbî emphasizes the importance of dialectic in philosophical investigation. Indeed, its role in the inquiry into natural, political, and divine science, natural, political, and divine science, is central. But in his treatise about the art of demonstration, which precedes the book of dialectic, in his presentation of logic and functions as something like a, in the book of dialectic, in the book of demonstration, the way he presents logic functions as something like a commentary on Aristotle's posterior analytics. And there he speaks of the art in terms of what it needs to accomplish. It's an art that does not lead to the culmination or to the achievement, much less the perfection of universal theoretical or practical philosophy. So how can this be reconciled with that startling affirmation in the Book of Letters that thanks to Aristotle, both universal theoretical and practical philosophy have now been perfected, with no room left in them for investigation? Let me just say this in a summary manner rather than going into detail. A careful reading of the book of demonstration shows that what we learn concerning assent, tasdeeq, and concept, tasawwur, leaves us short of complete knowledge. And here's the reason I say this. For Al-Fârâbî, complete assent is certainty. But, and I just want to back up a moment. I'm sticking with the traditional translation of tasdeeq as assent, because it's become so commonplace. But I have a suspicion that one should substitute assent for, one should substitute avero for assent, or whatever other English word would get the notion. If I usaddiq Allah something, that's more than simply assenting to it. When I usaddiq Allah shay'in, I'm saying, I'm giving it my conviction, my statement of a certain truthfulness in it, or veracity in it. So complete assent is certainty. Yet assent is belief. It has many aspects, but above all, it entails believing that a thing exists outside the mind as one judges it to exist in the mind. We try through demonstration to get complete certainty, al-yaqeen al-tam. But in dialectic, we achieve only proximate certainty, al-yaqeen al-qareeb. Okay? Moreover, what is common to us, most of us, is testimony. Now, testimony is based on generally accepted or generally received opinions, on maqbulat or on mashhurat. So they are not fully certain. What about the other concept? What about the other term, concept? It's to form a concept of a thing according to what summarizes its essence, to accept it according to what its definition signifies. That's all that Al-Fârâbî says about concept in the book on demonstration. So then in the rest of the treatise, what he's trying to do is to explain how we attain certainty. What's central to certainty, however, remains belief. Certainty is an i'tiqad, is a belief. The book ends, the last chapter, the next to last chapter of the book of demonstration is the discussion of the sorts of demonstrative discourse. And there are 4 sorts of demonstrative discourse. For us, these are very, very important. There's demonstrative discourse as instruction and learning. And this means instruction that is training. Teach somebody to have a habit that brings about an action. The kind of training that allows you to jump higher or run faster or do something physical in a better manner. It's also, and this is done through imitation, sometimes, and you can also teach somebody to have very good penmanship. And that's done through dictation, through pointing, through writing. The other kind of instruction is an instruction that provides knowledge. And this is carried out either by means of speech or by something like divine inspiration. Now, this is very, very important. What has happened is that he's pushed aside one aspect of instruction, the training aspect, because not only is the training having to do with action, but it also has to do with character formation. In his summary of Plato's laws, character formation, which he called there ta'addub, was very, very important. Here, rather than speaking of ta'addub, he speaks of ta'adib, and says that it's something, it has to be enumerated, but it doesn't seem to be very important. Now, for those of you who are much better Arabists than I am, I'd like to throw out the following suggestion. Ta'adib is a way of pushing adab on somebody. Ta'addub is a way of pushing an adab into yourself. In other words, it's a self-generated process. The other one is brought into a person from the outside. For some reason, in law giving, you want to ensure that the person takes it on him or herself. When you're talking about these things in this theoretical manner, you can force it upon the person. I throw that out just as a simple instruction. And then finally, the other 2 kinds of instruction and learning, it's how you achieve assent. And the way that you achieve assent is to use these different non-theoretical arts, these arts of dialectic, of rhetoric, and of poetic, to get people to assent to things. And finally, there are the principles of instruction, which seem to culminate in sophistry. At any rate, sophistry is the last word. Okay, I think I've gone on very long. Let me try to just wrap this up, but by concluding with a couple more thought-provoking things. So what dialectic actually promises, its special gift, is raising doubts about assertions. But what are the limits of that gift? How does that affect our understanding of certainty? For the question of certainty, and also how to arrive at first principles, the discussion of experience in Al-Fârâbî's Kitab al-Musiqa al-Kabir is essential. It's especially important. You can't, the big book of music, you can't get at first principles for musical things by reasoning, but you can get at them by experience. Now, think about another treatise that has recently come to light, the Didaskalia. And Friedrich Welter wrote an interesting article some time ago on Al-Fârâbî and the Didaskalia. The whole issue of paragraph 38 and the way she divides the Didaskalia and Al-Fârâbî's attainment of happiness, section 59, about the meaning of certainty for the philosopher as opposed to the multitude, needs to be thought about. There's also something else in the Didaskalia that I think is important. The Didaskalia tries to consider the art of logic as an ascent, as the man who breaks out of his chains and walks to the mouth of the cave, goes through the logical arts in the way that we go through, categories de interpretazione, and so forth. But then once he comes back to help the other people leave the cave, he comes back down through the logical arts in reverse order. That's very interesting. I know that Thérèse has dwelled on this in some of her work. It needs to be worked on. By all means, we need to think about that. But there's one point that I haven't seen anybody dwell on to my satisfaction yet. Once you get up to the mouth of the cave, you have to stop and look at the sun. And you have to ask about the sun. What is the sun? Okay, now, just a couple of very quick things. It seems that whenever we get to the notion of demonstration providing us with knowledge, examples are mathematical. They have to do with geometry. Those are the examples Al-Fârâbî gives in his writings. A man who publishes in England was very outspoken about 4 decades ago in noting that Aristotle had never given an example of a demonstration. I'm thinking of Surabji and Surabji's writings. There also are there's some anecdotal evidence for the same claim. Abraham Lincoln seems to have claimed that in studying law, he became so perplexed by the term demonstration that he devoted himself to studying all of Euclid's elements to get a grasp of it. He turned to Euclid on geometry for his understanding, not to any other discipline. And then let me suggest the following. Could scripture be a way to see the limits of intellectual reason? In reading Maimonides, he considers the significance of Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac to derive from that having occurred in a prophetic vision. Now, it wasn't, in other words, it wasn't a historical incident. And therefore, this has a parallel with the story of the Garden of Eden in Genesis. If this represents the impossibility of being a pure intellect without the imagination and physical desires, that's a quotation, if that's what it is, then Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac depicts, and I quote again, the attempt of the human intellect to transcend the body and the imagination. Now, if freeing oneself from the body and becoming a pure intellect is not possible, nor desirable, then the angel who stops Abraham from killing Isaac stands for Abraham's realization that he cannot have apodictic demonstration, and the demonstrative knowledge of God, and thus must live and act through his corporeal existence, symbolized by his son Isaac. That's my rendering and borrowing the language of Alexander Green, and Green's trying to work through Maimonides using the eyes of Alexander Altman. Okay. Now, so here's the end. Where we are today, we're told daily, in the United States at least, follow the science. We're faced with a strange disease that threatens our well-being. And some people tell us to mask, they tell us to get vaccines, and others tell us to buy dirt and take baths in dirt. And if that doesn't please us, then to drink Clorox or to use other kinds of strange medications on our bodies. We have to understand the premises used in reasoning about sickness and health, physical as well as political. Thanks very much for bearing with me, and I stop here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm also I'm happy to invite our friends and colleagues Muqdad, Therese, Thierry, Gima, and Wasim and Yunus to comment on this lecture. So the floor is yours. You can just talk, and I.
Yeah.
Charles,
Okay.
I would like to come back to what you said about the great book of music, in which Fârâbî looks for primary principles in general. And there he tries to claim that experience, tajrib, he claims is different from induction. And he claims there that tajrib gives us certitude, yaqeen, I think, if I remember rightly, but that, of course, induction does not. But what exactly is the difference between it? When are we sure we have experienced tajrib and not simply induction? It's not very clear what he's arguing there. He makes that claim, and I think he makes it also in some of the logical text, that experience yields certitude. Well, induction does not. I can understand why he claims induction does not, because you are never sure you have had all the the items. You couldn't look at everything to make an absolute generalization. But how we reach this mysterious experience is not clear to me. And how do you interpret that claim? He says there is an act of the intellect that happened then.
Just a second. Yeah. Did you say the active intellect?
An act of
An active intellect. Yeah. The idea. I mean, when I think about how do we get knowledge is the way that discussion begins. And he sees the theoretical arts as allowing us to acquire knowledge of a thing's existence and the reason for its existence. He says that in the book on music, he says that in the book on demonstration. That's no problem. And he says in the book on music that the best explanation is in the Kitab al-Burhan. Okay, but how can you move? Well, you want to get to the first things, and you can't begin with the first things because you don't have them. So you have to begin with the last things and move to the first thing. And now, I don't know how that works in music. Okay, he tries to compare music to other arts, and especially to arts that have a theoretical aspect. And then he says, well, we don't know what the first things are, but we do know what happens if you thump on a piece of wood, or if you blow through a reed or something like that. And then he gets to those perceived notions. That's where I stop. I see him having made his argument there, and I don't know where else it goes. Now you've got a great familiarity with the book, so where did you take it?
I have been wondering. He seems to be quite puzzled because the Greek in musical theory had already discovered that the length of chords and their proportion are not perfectly right. So that the mathematics don't fully agree with what the ear hears. And in fact, he criticized some of the Greek because he said some of them didn't know much about music. They didn't have a very fine-tuned ear, and therefore they didn't realize there was a little problem there. But he seems still to want to claim that we can find principles of music that would be specific to music and that could not be reducible to simply mathematical principles in listening to a lot of music.
Yes, and doing music.
Yes. So I am wondering if he's going into something like when people are sent to some tribe in the Amazon and they have to try to learn the language. How do they determine the number of phonemes? How do they discover the rules of grammar that the people are using? They don't know the rules of grammar, but they're certainly applying them. Because any language is a grammar, which may have some exception, but they are still. So I have been wondering what he's trying to say there.
Well, from the way I read this part of the book, big book on music, the issue is which comes first, theory or practice? Well, clearly in music, it's practice. That's for as you point out, he doesn't think you can trust the Greeks very much because they don't seem to know what they're doing, or they're arguing too much. And nobody has really looked to see what's happening among his fellow Arabs. But he has. And he seems to have a remarkable, well, first of all, not his fellow Arabs, among those with whom he's living, because he's coming from yet another culture. And he sees what's happening in music in the milieu that he inhabits. And that means that theory doesn't guide practice, practice guides practice. And practice and becoming thoughtful about what you do may lead to theory. Now, I simply don't know. I don't have enough musical skill to be able to reason about this, but think about the things that we do know. Yes, by reflecting on what I do in certain activities, I can begin to make rules for myself that go from simple practice to a kind of theory. And then when he goes to talk about the theoretical art simply, he points out that over and over, what we do is we accept opinions about X or Y, and then work from those opinions. And what he would like us to do in this case is to accept those opinions and put them to direct testing through experience, through experimentation. I think that's what's going on.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, مقداد, please. مقداد,
Ouvre le micro.
le micro, s'il vous plaît. Le micro. Ok, attends. Alors, Mokdad, tu peux parler en français, s'il te plaît.
Si Charles me permet.
Non.
Oui, est-ce que, en pensant, en rapprochant musique et mille, est-ce qu'il y a lieu de distinguer peut-être trois niveaux par rapport à la philosophie ou musique par rapport à une science théorique? Est-ce qu'on peut distinguer trois niveaux, c'est-à-dire des généralités théoriques, disons, et puis des principes généraux de détermination, et puis des déterminations effectives qui donnent une harmonie ou un air ou une méla déterminée. Est-ce qu'on peut parler de ces trois niveaux chez Fârâbî? Une science théorique, des principes de détermination, ça relève du législateur aussi, et puis des déterminations effectives, c'est-à-dire une musique particulière ou une religion particulière. C'est un peu n'importe quoi ce que je dis. Est-ce que ça se tient?
Non, mais dans le livre de la religion,
oui.
Après les deux premiers paragraphes, où il énonce ce que c'est que la religion, ce que c'est que la religion, tout court. Quels sont les principes théoriques de cette religion et quels sont les principes pratiques, 1, 2, 3, de cette religion. Il parle pour la première fois d'une religion vertueuse. Il monte vers une définition générale. Nulle part, il ne distingue entre les religions telles quelles. Parce que s'il faut parler des religions, le terme est le pluriel de charia. À ce moment-là, la religion est entendue comme loi révélée. Et on peut avoir plusieurs lois révélées.
Oui.
Dans le Kitab al-Millah, on ne reçoit pas de règles, on ne reçoit pas ni de sunna, ni de charia. On a des principes théoriques. Et dans le Tahsil al-Saada, c'est la chose achevée qui est décrite. L'œuvre du philosophe est similaire à l'œuvre du prophète. Et c'est pour ça que je pense que c'est le paragraphe 55 ou 59. L'imam, le philosophe, le malik et le raïs al-awwal. Il ne dit pas Nabi, mais il dit quoi? Qu'est-ce qu'il dit? واضع الشرائع. C'est une seule idée. Ce sont, tous les 5 sont uniques.
Non, c'est-à-dire pour évoquer un peu ce tahdid et ce taqdir, effectivement.
Oui.
Oui, c'est ça. C'est-à-dire comment déterminer, que ce soit en musique, que ce soit comment on déterminer, ou taqdir, c'est-à-dire donner quelque chose d'une certaine grandeur, disons.
Je ne sais pas, mais voici une suggestion. Dans le Kitab al-Burhan, quand il veut parler des 4 causes, al-Madda, et puis il parle de Had al-Shay, al-Fa'il, wa al-Ghaya, wa al-Ghaya. Bon, ça c'est intéressant. Had al-Shay, définition de la chose. Qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est la forme.
Oui, c'est la forme.
Et donc, ce que tu cherches là de discussion, c'est la forme. C'est ce que nous cherchons. Quelle est la forme? Et comment la forme, est-ce qu'elle se distingue des autres causes, de la cause matérielle et de la cause agente? Et ça, c'est un thème très important dans le Kitab al-Huruf, où il essaie de nous dire on ne peut pas avoir le matériel sans la forme, ni la forme sans le matériel. Ce qui veut dire qu'il n'y a pas de... Est-ce que ça veut dire qu'il n'y a pas de arah? Quel est le terme de freischwebende Geister? Free floating spirits.
So, Thierry, do you have any question?
Yes,
Yes.
I have to get myself off mute. Thank you very much, Charles, for this summary and presentation. And it's nice to hear you speak of your lifetime of reading over these different texts and noting the important emphases in each. I'm interested in many things that you said, but let me just zero in on 1 or 2 here. Tell me more about your thoughts on the translation of tasdeeq as belief, or,
and you all tell me. Averral is the best I've come up with. Okay, Averral. I don't know what a good French word would be. Assentiment,
Assentiment, oui. Assentiment.
but it has the same problems. Okay, I mean, if I'm in a court of law and I'm asked about something that happened, I would have to say, Sadiq al Sadiqi Fulan can fil bayt. Okay. I test or well, yeah, and that's my shahada. That's my testimony.
Testimony.
And but if you say to me, is the glass empty or full? I would assent to one of the. I guess I would say one of the others. But in saying that I assent to that. I'm saying I give my judgment of that being veracious. And the reason for my dwelling on this is because sadaqa has become so very important in other parts of what Al-Fârâbî says, both in the Book of Letters, I mean, everywhere. And in this whole notion of veracity. In fact, at one point I decided I had to use the word veracity because it wasn't simply haqq, it wasn't, or sahih, it was something else.
Therese, do you have something to add? Just before coming back to Thierry.
Just that there is a brand new book by Strobino about Avicenna theory of science. And he translates tasdeeq by assertion.
Assertion.
For you.
So isn't the problem, though, with...
Who is this? What, say the name again?
Strobino.
Oh, okay.
And he has just published this big book on Avicenna's theory of science. It's
But
just
isn't the problem with both assent and even more so with assertion is that there's too much will in it. And the weakness of assent is that it doesn't account for the possibility that there may be some knowledge there. It's like mashurat. To translate it as opinion makes it sound, at least in English, like there's no possibility for knowledge there, but there may be, or there is some, and it's better than nothing. Generally accepted judgments or opinions are better than nothing at all. And assent, or we need a word that allows the possibility that there may be some knowledge, even if not ilm al-yaqeen, right? And so these words that have so much will in them are not what he's getting at. Am I correct in that?
But the problem is that we are talking also about the demonstrative assent. Ibn Rushd, for example, used tasdeeq burhani.
Right.
Yes.
In certain contexts.
But he also
Yeah, even when, it's like, we can divide tasdeeq to dialectic, to dialectical, discourse, and demonstrative, as we can, have rhetorical, assent. So the assent can be divided into 4 or 5, kinds.
But remember that Ibn Rushd also spoke of al-Burhan al-Jadali and al-Burhan al-Khatabi. And
I'm not sure about this. Where? Sorry about
in the thing that I still haven't published.
yes. So you are the only one who knows.
God willing.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead, please, Thierry. Go ahead if you have something.
Well, this is straying into something else, but I think it's related. Al-Fârâbî is not going to say metaphysics doesn't matter. He is just going to say we don't possess as much of it as we think we do. And any quick version of what we think we have is problematic. And that's the whole problem with demonstration. It's easy for me to sit here and say, well, I have all these demonstrations, and it's up to everybody else to learn them. But of course, that's a problem, isn't it? And so when he says we don't possess metaphysics, it doesn't mean it doesn't matter, but that almost every attempt.
Remember what it's followed by. Therefore, everybody has to have recourse to philosophy.
Which would mean the goal is still valuable, but remember you're working at the stage of dialectic, and that you don't simply assert yourself to possess demonstrations, which is the challenge we face with scientific communities and religious and political communities all the time, isn't it? So in the recent volume you published, the political regime has a whole section which is some hint of the importance of metaphysics, but it is very cursory and very limited, and it leads indefinitely to that whole discussion in the second part of the political regime, which is about cities and politics. And he has to drag us down off our pedestals and make us be philosophers again, rather than being those who are distributors of knowledge.
Well, let me remind, and you all are especially adept at this. Some people criticized what I had to say about the opening part of the political regime and the images that he offered, because I didn't take seriously enough. In fact, I even made light of the claims that seem to be made there concerning the active intellect. The parallel to that text, it seems to me, is his treatise on the intellect, a treatise that's sort of a commentary on Aristotle's De Anima, book 3, chapters 5 through 7. You won't be surprised at what I'm about to say. As I read the book 3, 5 through 7, I don't see that much emphasis in Aristotle on the active intellect. I see some problems raised that could be answered by having recourse to an active intellect, but I don't see Aristotle doing it. And so when I read Al-Fârâbî's treatise on the intellect, I'm surprised to find him all of a sudden speak as though the whole discussion is about the active intellect. And I don't know where that comes from. I mean, it doesn't come from his exposition. It just jumps in to the discussion. I haven't done my homework to look at Ibn Rushd and what Ibn Rushd in his middle commentary says about this. Or, Thérèse, you know this very well, what about the long commentary? Even though the language is different, you can probably put in the Arabic that's appropriate.
So, okay, may I allow myself to ask you some questions? I mean, you cannot talk about, I mean, Al-Fârâbî's dialectic without mentioning the same word used by Muslim theologians, mutakallimun. So, shall I ask you about what do you think about the perspective of Al-Fârâbî on dialectic used by al-mutakallimun? I mean,
well, I think that Al-Fârâbî is very critical of the mutakallimun with whom he's had interactions, either interactions in reading or interactions in life.
Yeah.
And the harshness of his attack upon Sina'at al-Kalam in the enumeration of the sciences, it's remarkably harsh. And I find it fascinating that when he writes his own book of religion, there is no Kalam.
Mhm.
He completely excises Kalam. Fiqh does the whole thing. Or if you really want to see Kalam, then it's the last part of that book where he brings in philosophy, political science, which is a part of philosophy, a political science which is guided by a very hierarchical Aristotelian perspective of the world.
Mhm, mhm.
I mean, I suppose you could say, so the best Kalam is a Kalam that is faithful to Aristotelian science.
Okay, I mean, can we enumerate at least the Kalam statement among the kinds of discourse? Kalam, is it just rhetorical or dialectic? What is the identity of Kalam as a discourse?
Well, I mean, if you take the enumeration, then it's sophistic.
That's great. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does he redeem it else? I think that's a critique. Does he redeem it anywhere else? And if the suggestion about what's going on in the Book of Religion is accurate, then he redeems it by tying it to chain of being reasoning.
Moqdad, tu as quelque chose à ajouter, je pense.
Oui.
Ouvre le micro, s'il te plaît. Le micro, ouais. Bravo.
Merci. Oui, c'est vrai que Fârâbî est très critique à l'égard des mutakallimun quand il décrit leur méthode qui va jusqu'au terrorisme, disons maintenant, puisqu'il menace de tuer. C'est une méthode dialectique de menacer de tuer quelqu'un, c'est de la dialectique. non, mais je plaisante. Mais quand même, si on regarde un peu Ibn Rushd, le Kalam garde quand même sa fonction pour Fârâbî sur deux niveaux. Parfois, le Kalam est l'intermédiaire entre le philosophe qui conçoit, qui a les vérités éternelles et tout, et le commun des gens. Il garde cette fonction alors que Rushd, il n'y a plus de mutakallim dans la cité, non, il est chassé. Deuxième fonction curieuse d'ailleurs chez Fârâbî du Kalam, dans la première utilité, la première occasion où les mutakallimun peuvent être utiles dans une cité. Lorsqu'ils traduisent, ils rendent plus proches les vérités, disons que le philosophe connaît, atteint, et tout ça. Ils les rendent plus proches du commun des gens. Et deuxième fonction, et c'est curieux, dans le huruf, ça je pense, Fârâbî semble admettre une fonction même théoritique pour les mutakallimun, c'est-à-dire ils sont capables d'atteindre ou de généralité, disons, ou de vérité, ou même de législation. C'est curieux, c'est deux trucs. Non, C'est-à-dire, ce qui m'a semblé un peu curieux par rapport à Ahsa al-Ulum, c'est que pas seulement la philosophie est capable de saisir des généralités ou d'énoncer des généralités, mais quelque part aussi, les mutakalimoun peuvent disons, formuler des principes généraux.
Oui.
Ça, dans le hourouf, je pense. Et ça, ça m'a semblé un peu contradictoire. Non? C'est deux perceptions du cas.
Oui, c'est dans la deuxième partie aussi.
Oui, Pardon? Dans la deuxième partie.
C'est dans la deuxième partie de Kitab al-Huruf.
Oui, il semble, oui. Il est le seul pratiquement à le faire parmi les philosophes par rapport à Averroès ou à Vicenne.
Oui.
C'est-à-dire, il ne les a pas chassés comme l'a fait Branchi, par exemple. It's out.
Thierry?
I don't want to interrupt you, Fouad, if you want to continue there, but...
Okay, I mean, no problem. Just go ahead. I mean, we are...
So, Charles, why are there these short treatises between...
maybe you have to wait for a while. I mean... Can we continue, Charles? Are you?
Yeah.
Good.
Go ahead. Why are there the? You know this better than I do. I mean, you're the one who's studied these short treatises. It just occurs to me that for so many years we made such a fuss with Ibn Rushd about the three levels of commentaries. And we were intent upon definitions rather than upon understanding. And then all of a sudden I noticed, remember that when Mohsen Mahdi first began to talk about the different kinds of commentaries that Al-Fârâbî did in his introduction to the first edition of the Kitab al-Huruf, he couldn't come up with a term. He didn't know whether he should call them short middles or middle shorts. They were something that he couldn't put his hand on. Well, indeed, they are something you can't put your hand on. It's very difficult to, as you read them, to see where Aristotle is in all of this, or how close this is to Aristotle. It's very clear in the treatises that you've worked on, Terry, that Al-Fârâbî is presenting an overview of Aristotle to a generally educated but not terribly well-educated audience. I think that in these what I'm calling middle commentaries, he assumes that you've already read your Aristotle, but you have questions about how these work. He wants to talk about the concepts that are at issue. Okay, and over and over he comes back to redoing the Aristotelian corpus, and especially to redoing the Aristotelian logic. In the Book of Letters, the same thing. What he says is very abstract, but it's quite faithful to what Aristotle's logic is. And now he's seizing upon certain problems and trying to show how we can work our way through those problems.
Okay. Right. So Aristotle has even said in the prior analytics that the dialectics is finished. And so he assumes that we know and have read the dialectics as we are reading the prior and posterior analytics. And just so we don't make any mistake about that, Al-Fârâbî says, look, I'm going to take some of the material from the dialectics, from what follows, the demonstration, I'm going to put it before, so that so that when you're looking for these premises to fit in the forms of your logical syllogisms, you are confronted with the seriousness of the problem of finding those first principles and finding the premises to work through your arguments. So the tahlil is completing what Aristotle, so that there is no mistake in understanding what Aristotle was doing. The tahlil is taking some of the dialectical material of the topics and putting it in front of the posterior analytics. And Al-Fârâbî simply is continuing what Aristotle is assuming we're going to do, but which obviously the history of interpretation has ignored for the most part. And Al-Fârâbî says, look, this is just what Aristotle was all about here. And he gave you enough hints, but just so that there's no mistake, some of this material is better put in front of the posterior analytics than after it. Is that correct?
That sounds very persuasive to me. The only thing I would offer a slight change on is that Aristotle. Maybe this is just what we need to know about logic. When Mohsen Mahdi, when people were reading Mohsen Mahdi's book about Al-Fârâbî, trying to decide whether to publish it or not, one of the readers for the University of Chicago Press, which did publish it, said, what this is a letter home. What Al-Fârâbî is doing in his writings is writing a letter home about what people need to think. And this image comes back to me all the time as I read Al-Fârâbî. This is what you need to know. Now, what home means, again, is very difficult, because here's this fellow who comes from God knows where, who learns Arabic as a second language, but seems to be thoroughly imbued in the best of Arab culture for his era, okay? and to be critical of some of it. I don't know what you think about that.
Do you have something to add, Thierry?
I'm
Thank you. Okay.
No, it's very good.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I'm pleased to share with you, I mean, Charles and our friends, I mean, an understanding, a modest understanding, I mean, about why Al-Fârâbî was so harsh in his critiques against, I mean, the mutakallimun. I guess that because dialectic for him is an introduction to demonstration, an introduction to science, which I find that is something in common with Ibn Rushd. I mean, we need to keep dialectic away from victory. I mean, which is the aim of theologians. I mean, in victory is something that is contrary to the truth. While, I mean, dialectic is there to help us in searching or in looking for the truth together. So, I mean, Al-Fârâbî is, I mean, in his book on dialectic, is really eloquent when presenting the rules and the functions of dialectic as a way to to search, for the truth. I mean, I guess I'm not sure, but I'm talking to you as an expert. I mean, I guess this is exactly the way, the reason why he was so critical. I mean, that's it. What do you think?
When Muqtad was speaking earlier, I was having difficulty remembering the attention given kalam in the book of letters. and that's why you saw me reaching here and there to get folders. In the book of letters, I think the attack against the mutakallim or the mutakallimun is the same.
Mhm.
There's something about the way they go about their art, or how they understand themselves as sania, that is problematic. And Al-Fârâbî is, but he's not addressing the art itself. It's the practitioner of the art, or the practice of the art. Now, what would be a good art of dialectical theology? More and more I come back and I say, try sections 21 through 27 of Book of Religion and see if that works. And I could be off on the numbers. I'm just doing that off the top of my head. But in other words, where he starts with his chain of being discussion all the way to the very final paragraph. We need it. We need Kalam. We do need to have our beliefs defended. But we don't need to have everything battered in its defense. I think that's the issue. We human beings, all of us, continue to have this today. Especially in these United States, as we find out about strange religious beliefs influencing politics. And yet we would like people to be guided, if it does make them into better human beings by religious, and if religious belief is the best way to get that adab instilled, so much the better.
Okay. I guess. Go ahead, Muqdad. تفضل.
Oui, certainement, il y a des bons mutakallimun. C'est pour Fârâbî, s'ils ne prennent pas, c'est-à-dire l'erreur des mutakallimun, c'est de prendre ces temthilat pour des vérités. C'est leur temthilat, les simulacres ou des trucs de vérité pour des vérités. C'est ça leur erreur fondamentale pour Fârâbî. Mais si maintenant ils trouvent le philosophe qui vient à leur secours, leur formuler maintenant à partir de vérités scientifiques, ils seront de bons mutakallimun pour rapprocher ces vérités. C'est peut-être c'est là où quand Fârâbî refuse les mutakallimun et quand il accepte le Kalam dans la cité. Je pense lorsque ils ne prennent pas leur présentation des choses pour des vérités, comme font les mutakallimun, et ils ont droit en fait de faire cela, mais quand ils partent des vérités acquises définitivement par la science. Et là, ils ont peut-être besoin du philosophe pour formuler avec rhétorique, avec dialectique, avec tout ça. Peut-être là, on peut répondre un peu à la question de Fouet.
Oui.
Alors que non. C'est-à-dire, ils peuvent se racheter dans une cité, mais pour les Bruges, non.
Oui.
Condamné.
Alors, so it's time to end this nice, interesting, wonderful, discussion and lecture. I thank you so much for your time. It's always, a pleasure to listen to you. Thank you, Thérèse, Muqdad, Thierry, Jima, Wasim, and Yunus for your contributions. See you maybe in Paris. I don't know.
Hello.
I'm not sure, but see you soon, inshallah. Having a nice afternoon and nice evening.
Thank you very, very much, and best wishes to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Fuad, for organizing.
Thérèse, Thierry, Charles, thank you, Fuad, Emma.
Thanks.
شكرا
Okay.
جزيلا.
I-
مع السلامة.